Hi, it's Reed from Blue Bear Quilts, and today I'm going to show you how to make our ribbon runner, table runner. This is a small table runner, or it can also be a wall hanging. And it involves paper piecing so that you can get those nice sharp points. This fabric is Stained Glass Garden by QT Fabrics, and the pattern is available on our website. So let's get started, and I'll show you how to paper piece with Blue Bear Quilts. Okay, to get started on the ribbon runner, table runner, we need a pattern. And in the pattern, you will see all of the materials that need to be cut, and then you will see cutting instructions to cut out shapes for the various sections of the paper piece pattern. So here are some squares that have been taken that are going to cover these white shapes. And there is a rectangle that's going to cover that center shape. And then we have to cut the dark blue fabrics at an angle, and so I wanted to show you that. So this is the piece that the instructions ask you to cut out, and you're going to cut it from the upper left-hand corner, to the lower right-hand corner. So we're going to place the ruler like this and cut like this. And all of our pieces should be right side up, so they're all going to be like that. And then you can see that when they get placed on the back of this, they're going to go like that, and they're going to go like that. And so the instructions tell you the shapes and sizes and colors of these pieces that need to be cut out ahead of time. And so let me finish doing the cutting, and then we'll start sewing the pieces to the back of our paper foundation. Now, when we're foundation paper piecing, you always start by placing the fabric on the back side of the paper, and then we're going to sew on the lines on the right side of the paper. So the first thing we're going to do is cover this center diamond section with the blue fabric. So you kind of need to have it with a light behind so you can see what you're doing, and then we're going to place the blue fabric over that shape on the back, making sure that the fabric is covering where our 1/4 inch is on the outside of the block. And we can hold it the other direction too, and just make sure that we've got that centered so that it's going to cover that shape completely. I'm having kind of a hard time showing you this, but you can hold it up to the light and then basically see that you've got that whole shape covered. Okay, then once we have that done, just want to double check it again here. We're going to take and we're going to pin it in place. And this first piece, when you're paper piecing, always goes right side up. So we have that in place. We can see that it's completely covering the shape that we want it to cover. And then this was piece A1, so now we're going to look for piece A2, which is this one. So now we need to have a light blue, that's going to cover that shape. Now that we have our first piece positioned right side up on the back of our foundation, covering the A1 shape, we're now going to trim this piece, and we do that with a postcard. So you take a postcard that's big enough, actually a little one will work for now, and you put it on that line. And fold it back. And then you take your add 1/4 ruler and you place it along that edge that you just created, and you trim this extra off. except I think I have one of the pins in the way. I do. So that is one of the things you have to be careful of, is that there are no pins in the way. So let's try that again. Probably was not good for my rotary blade. And now we trim that off. Okay. And then the next piece that we're going to be putting on is going to be the A3 piece. So we're going to trim that one at the same time. So again, we put the postcard along the line between A1 and A3 and fold it back like this. Put your add a quarter ruler along that edge, and see what's nice is there's like a little ridge on the back of this ruler that lines up right up against that paper, which gives you an exact 1/4 inch. So we trim that off. Okay. Now the first one we're going to do is the one between A1 and A2, so that's this one up here. So now we have to take one of these light blue squares and make sure that it's going to cover that diamond shape. So by lining it up like that, it should cover it. So then we're going to take and flip this down like this and line it up right with that edge that we cut. And we can pin that in place. And then on the front side, we're going to sew on this line right between the A1 and the A2. I'll show you how we do that next. So what I've done is I've stitched right on this line between A1 and A2, and I lowered the stitch length in my machine from 2.5 to 1.5. And the reason I did that is because later when you have to tear the paper off the back of the block, by having a smaller stitch length, it'll be much easier to remove the paper. So I don't know if you can see that or not, but basically I've sewn right, I started before that point right there, so I'm off in the seam allowance there, sewed along there, and I went a little bit past to right down there. Then we take and flip it over on the back, and now we're going to press it. So I'm going to remove this pin, and we're going to press it like this. And that was our A2 shape there. So now we also need to do the A3 shape. So this is another one of the blue fabrics, and it's going to go and cover that shape like that. So we need to go back here, and in the light, make sure that it's going to cover it. So that will cover it there. And now for these next pieces, they are placed right side down on top of that center piece that was right side up. So I'm going to place that one right there and pin it. And we need to be sure that when that folds up, it's going to completely cover that triangle shape right there. So I'll go sew that and I'll be right back. So now you can see I've sewn from between the A1 and the A3, right, starting outside of that line there, going along there, and down here into the seam allowance again. And as you go along, if these little threads bother you, you can clip these. And the other thing that you can do is there's a total of 5 of these blocks that need to be made. So you can basically do this in a chain or sequence of like putting each piece as you need and keep going, but I'm just doing one at a time to show you. So now that we have this piece on, we're going to remove this pin. We're going to test this to make sure that it did cover the piece that we want it to cover. And it looks like it did. And so then we're going to set this seam right here. Finger press it, and then we're going to take and press that right like this. Okay, so now we have pieces A1, A2, and A3 in place. Actually A2 and A3, so the next one is going to be A4. That's this one right over here. So now we're going to take and place our postcard along the line between the A1, 2, and 3 and A4 and fold it over right on top of the cardboard like that. And then you can pull these where it's kind of sewn into the seam allowance. You can just kind of pull those out like I just did there. And then make sure you get it right on the line. Okay, and then this time I'm going to use a bigger add-a-quarter ruler. So there's one that's this size. This one is a 12-inch, and it also has that little ridge along the back. So we're going to lay that right along that fold we just made and trim these up. And then we're also going to have to do that on the other side. So we'll do the same thing by coming over here. Just make sure that none of your pieces fold back so that you end up cutting them off. And then we're going to line the postcard again along that line. And fold it over on itself. And then you can tear those ones out that are stuck to the paper. Make sure you're getting it folded right on the line. And then put your add-a-quarter ruler up right against that fold that you just made and trim these pieces. Okay. So now we're going to be adding the dark blue pieces. And they're going to be fitting like this and like this. So we need to make sure that this one's going to cover the area. So when I line it up like that, it looks like it is. And then I'm going to fold this back and put it right along here like this. And these pieces are sized a little bit big so that it makes it easy for you to place the fabrics without too much trouble and not have to worry about covering the shape appropriately. So there we go. We got that pin in place, and now I'm going to sew on this line between the A1, 2, and 3 and the A5 line. You can see that I have sewn along this line between the A1, 2, and 3 and A5 from up here outside in the seam allowance to down here below the seam allowance. Now we'll take the pins out and we'll press that open. And we'll finger press it. And our block is starting to take shape. Don't you just love these little miniature irons? They're so handy to be able to press right at your cutting station. Now we need to sew a piece over on this other side from here to here. And again, we're going to want to make sure that we cover that space completely. And one way you can tell that is, like, see that line? If your piece is above and below the lines, it's typically going to cover it. So I've got that where I want it. Now I'm going to pin it in place. And I'm going to sew now between the A1, 2, and 3 and the A4 line. We've now sewn on this last line between the A1, A2, and A3 and A4. You could do either one of these. I actually did the A5 before I did the A4, but it doesn't matter. So now we'll take those pins out. And we're going to set this seam. And then we'll be able to see what our block looks like almost. And finger press it. You see how the block is beginning to take shape here? So we're just giving it one final good press. And then we're going to hold it up so that we make sure that we've completely covered everything, and it looks like we have. And now the last step would be to trim off the rest of this paper, and we're going to use a regular ruler to do that. So it's really convenient. If this ruler has like a 1/4 inch line, so you basically just place that 1/4 inch line on this. This is the edge of the block, and then this is your seam allowance that's out here. So you put the 1/4 inch line right on that block line that's on the colored section here. We're going to trim this off. I'm going to turn the block around. Do the same thing again. Line up that 1/4 inch line right on that outside seam line. Trim this up. You have to be careful with this step to make sure that you don't cut on the wrong line. You don't want to cut on this line. You want to make sure you're cutting on the outside line. So again, make sure that the ruler is reaching that outside line. This 1/4 inch line is right on the inside line of the block. Trim along here. And then our last cut is going to be over here. Trim along here. And there is our first block. Isn't that cool? That's how easy it is. Now that we have all of our blocks sewn and trimmed along the outside seam allowance, we're going to line them up like this. And the beauty of paper piecing is that you get these nice crisp points that sometimes if you were just sewing the block and not with the foundation, it wouldn't be quite that crisp. So that's the beauty of foundation paper piecing. Now, does it waste a little bit of fabric? Yes, it does. But to get the professional look that you get with paper piecing, I think it's worth losing a little bit of waste fabric. So now we get the blocks all lined up like this, and we're not going to remove the paper quite yet, because we're going to line the blocks up like this, and we're actually going to sew on this line, which will also give us the same benefit of the points that we got before. So you start by poking a pin here in the corner, and then check to see where it comes out on the other side. And it came out pretty dang good, so we'll leave it there. And we're just going to pin that in place. And we'll take and pin the other corner as well. That one did not come out so good, so we got to fix this one. So we're going to take and go like this. Poke it from the back. There we go. So now you can see I got it in the corner there. So we'll pin that like that. And then we're going to sew each one along that edge. And then once we've got them all sewn together in a row, that's when we're going to remove the paper from the back. They're all sewn together, and you could actually leave the paper on and sew on the borders, but I think that's overkill because it's just sewing a straight seam along the edge of the blocks. So I think it would be best to remove the paper at this point. So to do that, you basically fold it back and just rip it like that. And see, because our seam allowance, or our stitch length was so small, it rips off real easy. And then you can reach in here and grab like the next piece. And rip it out. We'll fold that along there, we'll tear that out. And you basically just tear all of these little pieces of paper out. And if any of them are more difficult like these are, you can always go in with the tweezers and remove the paper. But for the most part, it's gonna come out pretty easy. Oh, and one thing I wanted to show you when you're sewing the blocks together, you don't start at these points. You basically start at the edge and go all the way to the other end. You just start off the paper and sew to the other end off the paper as well, because you want those seams sewn the whole way. And then when we get to this seam allowance, we just fold that back and rip it off. And with that shorter stitch length, they come out pretty easy. One more to do here. And there we go. We've got all of our paper removed now. And look at it, what a nice flat block that is on the back. And just as nice from the front. So you basically would continue removing all of the paper and then sew on your inner and outer border, and I'll be back to show you what the runner looks like when it's all done. There we go. We're all done with making the ribbon runner. I also have it in another colorway. Here it is in a pink tone. And I'll show you a close-up of those fabrics. There's some fun little dragonflies in among those stained glass roses. So I hope you've enjoyed learning how to paper piece with Blue Bear Quilts ribbon runner pattern. If you'd like this pattern, remember it's available on our website. And also, if you've liked this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our videos, and also hit the little bell so that you'll be notified every time we post a new video. Well, I've enjoyed showing you how to paper piece today, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye-bye.